Beth with Wasatch Community Gardens, here to talk about planting garlic. Mid-October to mid-November is the perfect time along the Wasatch Front to be planting garlic in your garden for harvest next summer. So we're going to talk about a couple of different things. First is prepping your garden bed. So if you are growing in the ground in native earth, you're going to want to clear all your crops that you have been growing during the summer. Maybe it was a squash bed or a tomato bed. Once those crops are done, you clear those away, and then you're going to want to make sure that the bed is completely weed free. Garlic does not like competition from weeds. And then you're going to want to fertilize and incorporate some compost. So this bed is an example of a bed that has already been prepped, and it's just really quite beautifully prepared. And what was done was this beautiful compost was added. Probably about an inch of this compost at our Green Phoenix farm was spread on the surface like this, and then fertilizer added. In this case, some feather meal. Blood meal is wonderful. At the Green Phoenix farm, they use some other amendments as well, like azomite and a little bit of kelp meal, but any form of nitrogen is going to do you really, really well with your garlic. So you would spread your blood meal on the surface as well, and then get a shovel or a spading fork and work it in to about the top 6 to 8 inches of the soil. And that has already been done in this bed. And really that's all you need to do for your bed prep for planting garlic. Once your beds are fully prepped and ready, then it's time to prepare your actual garlic for planting. Now, whether you're planting hardneck or softneck, doesn't matter. It's really all planted the same way. What you're going to want to do is choose one variety at a time to plant down your row and prepare those cloves. And you can do that simply by running your nail across the surface to kind of show the separation of those cloves, and then break apart those individual cloves. And each one of these cloves will be planted individually and make its own entire head for next summer. So it's pretty magical. You know, one head of garlic might have 8 to 12 really good plantable cloves. So one of these can make 12 of these. I mean, it's really miraculous. So you're going to want to go ahead and take apart your entire head and then choose from each of those cloves which ones to plant and which ones aren't really suitable for planting. So here we have the entire head broken apart of the cloves. Now we have, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, about 10 cloves. But look at this little guy here. This little clove is going to make a tiny, tiny, tiny little head. So he's going to go in a separate pile, and he'll be for dinner tonight. You want to choose the biggest and the best cloves for planting. I think this one is also a little bit on the small side. It's very, very narrow, and this is going to make a very tiny head of garlic. So he goes into the soup pot or whatever. But all these other ones look pretty good. It is nice to keep the wrappers intact. If the wrappers separate from the clove, and you can see the little naked clove inside. Thought I had one over here. So this one has the wrapper missing. That's an opportunity for soil-borne pathogens to enter and basically infect your little clove. So if you have one with the wrapper missing like this, that's a good one for the soup pot or for dinner. So keep your wrappers intact, and then keep your varieties separate. So this one happens to be German red hardneck, and I will write that on the tag. When I get further down the row to plant the Inchelium softneck, I will make a plant marker and identify, just so that I remember next summer which one is which. Okay, now comes the fun part. You've prepped your beds, you've broken apart your heads into the separate cloves for planting, and now you get to plant. And what I always recommend is planting about 6 to 8 inches down the row. You could do 7 inches, you could do 9 inches, but anywhere around this distance. So say that we start right here. I've got a ruler. You can use a ruler or a tape measure if you want, or you can just use the finger method. So then you would lay out your cloves like this all the way down the row before you put any of them in the ground. And the reason is, once you plant them, you don't know where they are because they're underneath the soil. So it's a really nice visual, and it also gives you an opportunity to say, wait, I got to the end of my row and I still have a clove left that I want to plant. So, all right, maybe I will do 6.5 so that I can get in my last clove. So laying them all out is a really, really good plan before you put any of them in the soil. Now, if your soil is really nice and loose and crumbly, which is perfect for garlic, and you can get your hand down in there 3 inches, then you probably don't need a trowel or like a spoon or a stick or anything to make the hole. I would say if your soil is not crumbly enough for you to be able to get down that deep, then you're going to want to maybe add some more compost to loosen it up. Get in there with a fork because garlic really loves loose, crumbly, well-drained soil. So if your soil is, really firm clay, it's not going to be a happy growing place for your garlic. So once you've got them laid out in your 6-inch increments, you can go ahead and start planting. Some people like to plant with the cloves all facing the same way down the row. So rather than one facing this way, one facing this way, one facing this way, you could actually turn them all the same way. Then their leaves will all grow the same way, enabling you to weed in between the rows next season, because again, garlic hates weeds. So that's one trick, is lining them up the same direction, not necessary. And at a more fundamental level, you want the flat end down and the pointy end up. The flat end is from the basal plate end of the plant of the entire head, which I have over here. So this is where the roots come out, right? So this clove was oriented like this in the head. The roots come out the bottom. So you want that part down and the pointy end up. And then once you've done all that, all you do is shove your garlic in. This is a little bit tougher right here. Got to make it whole. And you want to get it down to about your first thumb joint. This one's not quite deep enough. So I would come back and actually rework this a little bit because this is too shallow. This will freeze over the winter. This one will not. It's deep enough that it is buried really well. This guy would require some more loosening of the soil to really get him in there. So assuming these are all planted, you want to pat them down. I'll come dig that up later. And then you want to cover them to protect them from frost. So in our climate, if you do not apply any soil protection, any mulch on the surface, the cloves will likely freeze over the winter. That's not what we want. So some people like to use straw. That's fine. You can also use chopped leaves if you have trees in your yard and your leaves are available. And all you're going to want to do is not bury your ruler. You want to put about 6 to 8 inches of leaves or straw all the way down your bed. Over the winter, of course, these will become more compacted. The idea is just to add that insulating layer. And and also still allow for drainage. So the one thing is, if you can crumble your dry leaves, pine cone, if you can crumble them, the water will be able to penetrate a lot better, and it won't mat down. The leaves won't mat down, preventing good seepage of the rain and snow. And then you wait until next late February, early March, scrape everything aside, and you've got your new green garlic coming up, and we can talk next spring about what to do from there. So if you're not growing in the ground, but instead you're growing in raised beds, it's important to know what material is inside your raised bed. So if inside your raised bed you have topsoil and compost, then you're going to want to fertilize the same way, primarily with a nitrogen source like blood meal or feather meal at the label rate. You could also just go with about 2 pounds of that material for every 100 square feet of your garden. However, if you're growing in a raised bed that's filled with a soilless potting mix like peat moss, perlite or vermiculite, and compost, then you really want to add an all-purpose fertilizer like a 5-5-5 that has nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And that should take care of the bed prep. The other tip for raised beds is that with garlic, you don't want it to freeze over the winter, so you might not want to plant right up against the edge of your raised beds. Give it some, probably about 6 inches from the edge of your bed where you plant your first row of garlic, just so that those cloves don't freeze over the winter.